Breaking news, Viking Nation. The first revelation from Dublin is about to ignite a firestorm that will echo through US Bank Stadium and shake the very foundations of Minnesota football. While our Warriors battled on foreign soil against Pittsburgh, one cornerback reached speeds that no human being in NFL history has ever achieved, chasing down what should have been an impossible catch. But that superhuman effort couldn't mask the triple catastrophe that unfolded in Ireland, where our franchise quarterback remains sidelined with an ankle injury that's testing every ounce of Viking pride. Our offensive line crumbled like ancient ruins, with two devastating injuries that could derail our entire season, and our veteran signal caller took a beating that exposed the brutal reality of what happens when purple and gold warriors march into battle without proper protection. Each of these shocks could redefine the future of this team. And if you bleed purple more than you hate the Packers, you need to witness every single revelation that's about to unfold. Because what happened in Dublin wasn't just a loss. It was a glimpse into either our destiny or our destruction. And the next 90 seconds will determine which path Viking Nation chooses to walk. Picture this: a cornerback sprinting across emerald turf in Dublin, his cleats digging into foreign soil as he chases down what appears to be an unstoppable force of nature barreling toward the end zone. And in that moment of pure desperation and athletic fury, something magical and terrifying happened that has never occurred in the 8-year history of next-gen stats tracking. Isaiah Rodgers didn't just run fast, he shattered the laws of physics and human limitation, clocking an astronomical 23.32 miles per hour while chasing down Seattle's DK Metcalf during his 80-yard touchdown rampage that left Viking hearts bleeding across 2 continents. 23.32 miles per hour, Viking Nation. That's faster than any NFL player has ever been recorded moving since 2017. Faster than every single human being who has ever strapped on pads and cleats in the modern era of professional football. And it happened while wearing our sacred purple and gold in a moment of pure Viking warrior spirit that would make our Norse ancestors weep with pride. Metcalf himself, that towering beast of a receiver, hit 21.17 miles per hour during his touchdown dash. But even his freakish speed couldn't match the supernatural velocity that Rodgers unleashed in pursuit, creating a chase sequence that will be replayed in NFL highlight reels until the end of time. This wasn't just athleticism. This was a man possessed by the spirit of every Viking who ever sailed into battle against impossible odds, his body moving at speeds that defy human comprehension while representing the purple and gold with every fiber of his being. But here's what makes this story even more incredible. Rodgers didn't just break the speed record. He also blocked a field goal against Pittsburgh in the same game, proving that when Viking blood runs through your veins, you don't just play football, you transcend the very boundaries of what mortal men can achieve on a football field. Can you imagine being DK Metcalf in that moment, thinking you've broken free for an easy touchdown, only to hear the thundering footsteps of a Viking warrior moving at superhuman speed, gaining ground with every stride like some ancient Norse god of war pursuing his prey across the battlefield? And if you're sitting there thinking this speed demon is going to be the key to our defensive renaissance, smash that like button right now and show the entire NFL that Viking Nation stands behind our record-breaking warriors, no matter what chaos unfolds around us. But hold on. As shocking as that supernatural speed display was, the next bombshell cuts deeper into the heart of our franchise and threatens to derail everything we've built this season. The Dublin battlefield didn't just witness historic athleticism. It became a casualty ward that claimed 3 of our most crucial warriors in ways that could haunt us for months to come. J.J. McCarthy, our franchise quarterback and the supposed future of Viking football, remained on the sidelines nursing a high ankle sprain that has now kept him out of multiple games, watching helplessly as veteran Carson Wentz stepped into the spotlight and delivered a performance that both inspired and frustrated every purple-blooded fan watching from across the Atlantic. Wentz threw for an impressive 350 yards and 2 touchdowns, connecting with Justin Jefferson for 126 receiving yards in a display of aerial artistry that should have been enough to conquer the Steelers. But sometimes even warrior-level performances aren't enough when the football gods have other plans written in the stars. But the real trauma began unfolding along our offensive line, where the injury plague struck with the merciless precision of a Viking raid gone wrong. Right tackle Brian O'Neill crumpled to the turf with a knee injury that sent shockwaves through every fan who understands how crucial he's been to protecting our quarterback since 2018, while center Ryan Kelly suffered another concussion that marked his second head injury in just 15 days, a terrifying pattern that has medical experts and Viking faithful alike holding their breath in worried silence. Kelly's concussion is particularly haunting because he had just returned from missing Week 3 against Cincinnati due to his previous head injury against Atlanta, creating a nightmare scenario where our offensive line anchor is becoming increasingly vulnerable to the kind of brain trauma that ends careers and changes lives forever. The timing couldn't be more devastating. Losing O'Neill's reliable protection on the edge while simultaneously watching Kelly's health deteriorate creates a domino effect that could cripple our offensive capabilities just as the season reaches its most critical juncture. Do you realize what this means for McCarthy's development when he finally returns from his ankle injury, trying to learn the NFL game behind a patchwork offensive line that's missing its two most experienced leaders? And with Cleveland's Myles Garrett waiting to feast on our weakened protection next week in London, are you starting to understand why this triple loss in Dublin might be the defining moment that determines whether our season becomes a saga of triumph or tragedy? And just when fans thought it couldn't get more devastating, here comes the next revelation that exposes the brutal medical reality threatening to reshape our entire roster. Head coach Kevin O'Connell stood before the media in Dublin, his face bearing the weight of a leader who had just watched two of his most dependable warriors fall in battle, and the updates he delivered sent chills through Viking Nation that had nothing to do with the Irish weather. Brian O'Neill, our Iron Man right tackle who has been the steadfast guardian of our quarterback's blind side since joining the Purple and Gold, underwent evaluation that revealed the dreaded truth. Medical personnel were discussing his MCL, the kind of knee injury that can steal weeks or months from a player's season depending on the severity of the damage done on that Dublin turf. O'Connell's words carried the weight of grim possibility when he admitted they were concerned about the MCL, explaining how O'Neill, being one of the toughest warriors on the team, desperately tried to tape up the injury and return to battle. But sometimes even Viking courage isn't enough to overcome the cold reality of torn ligaments and damaged cartilage. If it's a mild MCL tear, we might see our stalwart tackle return after the bye week. But if the injury proves more severe, we could be looking at an extended absence that forces us to rely on backup Justin Skule against elite pass rushers like Cleveland's Myles Garrett, a matchup that strikes fear into the heart of every offensive coordinator in the league. Meanwhile, Ryan Kelly's concussion situation has evolved from concerning to genuinely frightening, with O'Connell revealing that this marks Kelly's second head injury in just 15 days, his fifth documented concussion of his professional career, and a pattern that raises serious questions about his long-term health and ability to continue playing the violent game of professional football. When asked about the bigger picture implications of Kelly's repeated brain trauma, O'Connell deferred to medical protocols and doctors, but you could hear the underlying worry in his voice when he emphasized that player health comes before everything else, and that this isn't something the coaching staff wants to mess around with, given the potentially life-altering consequences of repeated head injuries. The devastating reality is becoming crystal clear. Of our 5 starting offensive linemen, only right guard Will Fries has avoided injury this season, meaning our complete starting unit has never taken a single snap together as a cohesive group, creating the kind of chemistry and communication issues that can destroy even the most talented offensive schemes. Can you imagine trying to protect Carson Wentz or eventually J.J. McCarthy behind a constantly rotating group of injured and backup linemen, especially when facing the elite pass rushers that populate the AFC North and NFC powerhouses we'll encounter in the coming weeks? And if you're wondering whether this injury epidemic is going to define our season or motivate us to fight even harder, drop a comment below and let Viking Nation know whether you believe in our depth and coaching staff to overcome this medical nightmare that's testing every ounce of our purple pride. But trust me, the story only gets darker from here, because the next chapter reveals exactly how our offensive line's collapse translated into on-field disaster that had Viking fans screaming at their televisions across the globe. The brutal truth about our 24-21 loss in Dublin isn't just found in the final score. It's written in the 6 devastating sacks that Carson Wentz absorbed while trying to make magic happen behind a protection scheme that crumbled like ancient Viking shields under relentless enemy assault. 6 sacks, Viking Nation. 6 times our veteran quarterback was driven into the Dublin turf by a Pittsburgh defense that smelled blood in the water and attacked our wounded offensive line with the ruthless precision of medieval siege warfare. Wentz managed to throw for 350 yards and 2 touchdowns despite the constant pressure, proving that Viking spirit burns eternal even when the body is taking punishment that would break lesser men. But those 2 interceptions he threw under duress tell the real story of what happens when protection breaks down and desperation takes over decision-making in the heat of battle. The ground game, which had shown promise with Jordan Mason's 116-yard explosion against Cincinnati the previous week, was completely neutralized as Mason managed just 57 yards against a Steelers defense that knew they could pin their ears back and attack without fear of sustained rushing success. This wasn't just a bad day at the office. This was a systematic breakdown of everything that makes an NFL offense functional, from pass protection to run blocking, to the kind of sustained drives that keep defenses honest and create scoring opportunities in critical moments. The most heartbreaking part is that we were trailing 24-6 entering the 4th quarter, seemingly dead and buried on foreign soil, but somehow found the warrior spirit to score 2 touchdowns and convert a 2-point conversion to pull within 3 points, proving that Viking hearts never stop beating even when facing insurmountable odds in hostile territory. Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison both eclipsed 100 receiving yards in the loss, showing that when Wentz had time to throw, our aerial attack could move the ball against anyone in the league. But time was the one commodity our battered offensive line couldn't provide when we needed it most. Picture this scenario. You're down by 3 points late in the game. Your quarterback has proven he can move the ball through the air. Your receivers are making spectacular catches, and all you need is one sustained drive to either tie or win the game. But every time you drop back to pass, enemy rushers are collapsing the pocket like Vikings storming a medieval castle, forcing hurried throws and desperate scrambles that ultimately doom your comeback dreams. The upcoming matchup against Cleveland in London presents an even more terrifying challenge because Myles Garrett and the Browns' defensive front will be licking their chops knowing they're facing an offensive line that just allowed 6 sacks and lost 2 key players to injury in the span of a single afternoon. Do you think our coaching staff can cobble together enough protection to keep whoever's under center upright against one of the league's most feared pass rushers? Or are we walking into another bloodbath that could define the rest of our season? And listen closely. The next 72 hours might be the most decisive in this franchise's recent history, because the final revelation exposes how we let a future Hall of Fame quarterback slip through our fingers while settling for a backup plan that's both inspiring and heartbreaking. Aaron Rodgers never seriously considered signing with the Minnesota Vikings, despite the casual update conversations he had with Kevin O'Connell that apparently never evolved beyond friendly chatter between old acquaintances. But what if those conversations had turned into something more substantial? And what if we had pursued the 4-time MVP with the same intensity we once showed when chasing Brett Favre all those years ago? Rodgers eventually signed with Pittsburgh after an agonizingly long decision process that left multiple franchises hanging in limbo. But during those weeks of uncertainty, Minnesota was building their future around J.J. McCarthy while bringing in Carson Wentz as insurance. A strategy that seemed reasonable until you watch Wentz's performance against the Steelers and realize what might have been possible with a legendary quarterback running this offense. Wentz completed 14 of 20 passes for 173 yards and 2 touchdowns in his debut against Cincinnati, leading us to that glorious 48-10 demolition that reminded everyone why this offensive system can make quarterbacks look elite when everything clicks properly. But against Atlanta, McCarthy struggled mightily in a 22-6 defeat that exposed his inexperience and raised questions about whether we rushed our young quarterback into action before he was truly ready for prime time. Imagine Aaron Rodgers throwing to Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and T.J. Hawkinson in Kevin O'Connell's offensive system. A combination of quarterback genius, elite receivers, and innovative play calling that could have created the most explosive aerial attack in the NFC and possibly launched us into Super Bowl contention in a way that's now looking increasingly difficult with our current quarterback situation. The cruel irony is that bringing in Rodgers for one season would have given McCarthy another year to develop while putting us in position to compete immediately, solving both our short-term championship aspirations and long-term developmental needs in one brilliant stroke of front office strategy. Instead, we're watching McCarthy battle through a high ankle sprain while Wentz absorbs punishment behind an injury-riddled offensive line, wondering what could have been if we had made the kind of bold move that defines championship windows and separates contenders from pretenders in the brutal landscape of NFL competition. Rodgers is currently thriving in Pittsburgh's system, proving that veteran quarterbacks can still perform at elite levels when surrounded by the right pieces, while we're left to hope that our young quarterback can overcome injury and inexperience quickly enough to salvage a season that started with Super Bowl dreams, but is now teetering on the edge of mediocrity due to circumstances beyond our control. The question that will haunt Viking Nation for months or maybe years is simple but devastating. Did we choose the safe, conventional path when we should have swung for the fences and pursued a quarterback who could have transformed our championship timeline from maybe in a few years to right here, right now? And if you think the Vikings are still destined for greatness despite these setbacks, or if you believe we should have moved heaven and earth to sign Aaron Rodgers when we had the chance, hit that subscribe button and let the football world know that Viking Nation never backs down from adversity, no matter how dark the storm clouds appear above our purple and gold kingdom. Because if this week felt like a perfect storm of injury, disappointment, and missed opportunities, what's coming next in London against Cleveland could be the moment that defines whether we rise from these ashes like true Vikings or watch our season sink beneath the waves of an unforgiving NFL ocean that shows no mercy to the wounded and unprepared.